Good evening, everybody. My name is Charity Rouse. I'm the Director of Local History for the Spartanburg County Public Library System. And this is our final first Monday program in the 23-24 series. We will take a break during July, August, and September, and we will come back in October with the 24-25 series. So please feel free to take a look at our backlog on YouTube. We are recording this session, and the previous sessions are available in the genealogy playlist on the Spartanburg Library's YouTube page. If you are watching this online after the initial presentation, feel free to email the Kennedy Room at kroom@infodepot.org, infodepot.org, to get a link to the handout. They are no longer allowing us to post those with our YouTube videos. So, or call the Kennedy Room at the library. Contact information is at the library's webpage, which is on your screen. So tonight we will be talking about immigration and naturalization records and resources. We'll start early and then come up to the 20th century. We're not going to talk real recently, mostly up to about the 1930s. So hopefully I will cover what you're interested in. So, okay. So, a thank you as I get started. The lion's share of my family, in fact, every family member on my direct line was in the United States prior to 1820. So I have no examples on my direct line of any of this. So I've adopted a couple of further away relatives, for example, and very graciously a number of years ago, Kennedy Room patron Kathy has given permission for me to use her grandparents' papers, the Cazols, throughout this program. So I just want to thank Kathy again for that kind loan of her ancestors. So this is a certificate of naturalization. It is for Kathy's grandfather, Joseph Cazol, and it is a record that you are not going to find unless it comes through your family. The certificate is given to the person being naturalized. The court does not keep a copy of the certificate itself. They have the other records, but not the certificate. So when you're looking, don't forget to check your personal family records and ask those cousins and make sure that you've got folks available if they have those records. And I apologize if it's laggy. My Wi-Fi seems to be going very slowly right now. So a couple of naturalization definitions. Naturalization is the admittance of a foreigner to the citizenship of a country. It is a process that involves a couple of steps, which we'll talk about. Immigration, immigration, is the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country. Immigration within E is to leave one's own country in order to settle permanently in another. So pronunciation, they're the same pronunciation. It's just I is coming into the country, E is exiting your previous country, okay? So, naturalization timeline here in the United States, or what would become the United States. The earliest naturalizations were by colonies in the 1600s. 12 of the 13 colonies had naturalization laws and kept records. If your people were in New Hampshire, you're out of luck. They decided not to keep records of this. I'm not sure how they decided who could vote, but when that became a thing, or in town elections, but New Hampshire is the exception to the early naturalization rules. Now, these records will be found on the state level. They are typically held at either the state library or the state archive. It varies by state. So in South Carolina, you're looking at the Department of Archives and History, but some records may be at the state library. In Virginia, it is the Library of Virginia that keeps those records. So do a little bit of research on the state that you're looking at to make sure you're asking the questions of the right organization. Because like so many things, the answer is, where do I find this? Well, it depends. One thing we can tell you, prior to the 1780s, it's definitely not on any federal level because there wasn't one. So, check around. So, some key naturalization laws. This is the highlights. I could be speaking for days on all of the different acts, resolutions, and laws that were passed. In 1740, so, we've had people in the British colonies since 1607 in Jamestown. Sorry, Massachusetts, you were Johnny-come-latelys in 1620. In 1740 is the first real regulation of colonial naturalization and citizenship. And at that point, it becomes, you are a citizen of your colony. So my ancestors would have been citizens of the colony of Virginia and Great Britain. In 1776, when we declared our independence from Great Britain, if you were born in the American British colonies, you had citizenship. In 1778, the Articles of Confederation said that you were a citizen of all of the colonies. So not just Virginia, but the colonies, the United Colonies. And then by 1790, we have our first federal naturalization law, which established the process for becoming a citizen. So if you weren't born in the colonies prior to 1790, this is the law that would tell you how to become a citizen. We do have some of those very early records. This is from microfilm for South Carolina naturalizations prior to 1906. And these were naturalizations only in federal courts. So if someone was naturalized in a different court, they're not in these records, but it does help. So this is literally page 1 of this microfilm. We do have a copy of the microfilm here in the Kennedy room. But you see, this is an alphabetized clerks list, and it starts with John Anderson, who's 31 years old, from Norfolk, England. The next guy is William Aiken, 34 years old, of Antrim, Ireland. And then on the next page, the first gentleman, John, does not have a residence in the colonies because he's a mariner. So he's on a ship, but he wants to register his intent to be an American at this point. And this was 10th of August, 1808. And then William, on the second line, resides in Charleston. He is a merchant. And so he is admitted to citizenship 23rd of September, 1811. So you will find primarily men in these records. You will find a lot of mariners, a lot of merchants. Merchants were back and forth, and they wanted something recognizing their legal residence. We'll get to passports later. Passports were only kind of sort of a thing at this point. So, before we go too far, let's talk about women. Women had derivative citizenship. This means that the woman's citizenship status changed depending on the status of her husband. She was what her husband was. So if he was an alien, i.e. non-citizen, not a purple man from Mars, she was also considered to be a non-citizen. If he was a citizen, she would gain citizenship. This was the case until the Cable Act passed September 22nd of 1922. After the Cable Act in 1922, a woman could still lose her citizenship by marrying an alien, but had to go through the full naturalization process to regain citizenship. And women were losing citizenship well into the mid-20th century, so through World War II. So if you have a woman in your life who married someone who wasn't a citizen, check to see if they did the naturalization process to regain their citizenship. Okay? Prior to 1922, not an issue. If her husband naturalized, she naturalized. Derivative citizenship was also the case for minor children. Children under the age of 21 were considered derivative under a parent, father or mother, provided they had resided in the US for at least 3 years during most eras. It could be up to 5, but 3 is typical for the minor children derivative citizenship. If they turned 21 before that residency was up, they would have to do the process themselves, but their residency started under their usually father's situation. In 1906, it was a pivotal year for immigration law. 1820, we started keeping passenger list records. 1906, we mandated that all derivative family members be listed on the declaration of the head of household. Prior to that, they were not necessarily named. It was implied, which means if your family naturalized, head of family naturalized before 1906, you might not find them on the record. So it can be very hard to track the derivative citizenship. It's a little bit of a needle in a haystack sometimes, but the records are often there. You just have to figure out where to look. So, now there are some groups that were excluded from citizenship. So, between 1790 and 1866, explicitly excluded was anyone who was not a free white person. What happened in 1866? Emancipation Proclamation and the enacting of the constitutional amendment to grant citizenship and voting rights to African American freed slaves, males. Women didn't have voting rights, but they were considered citizens. Now, these are just examples. Chinese were denied citizenship under the Act of May 6, 1882, Chinese Exclusion Act, and it was repealed by the Act of December 17, 1943. So World War II. So if you were Asian, and this is just one of the examples, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, any of the Asian countries, largely you were not allowed to become a citizen until the 1940s. There's some exceptions, dig into it, but that's a program in and of itself. Native American Indians were granted citizenship under the Act of June 4, 1924. So 3 centuries of English colonies to American US and the Native Americans had no voice in citizenship. And there was an act in 1917, which was the first to require a literacy test in an attempt to stem the tide of immigrants. So we had, some immigration into the mid 1800s, and then by 1880, there were just waves and waves and waves of immigrants coming in from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Asia, and people were becoming afraid of too many immigrants. Does this sound familiar to anybody? What goes around comes around. And so they were trying to require literacy in English, which is a little bit cruel. But even before this, they had asked questions about, can you read and write? Didn't matter what language, but could you read and write? So they were trying to make sure that people were not coming here to become burdens to the non-existent at that time welfare system. So now there is a 100-question citizenship test. You can go online and you can take the sample test. I would challenge most of my high school classmates to be able to pass that because they couldn't. Most of us native born cannot pass this test because we didn't listen well enough in history class, and we don't remember it if we did listen. So I would challenge you, go take that test. It's rather enlightening. We think we know our history. So there were some times when there was automatic naturalization, therefore zero paperwork, other than a law being passed that draws the line in the sand that says people born in annexed territories, just like that 1790, if you were born in the colonies before 1790, you were automatically a citizen. So these territories, as they added to the US, those residents were added to the citizenship without paperwork. 1789, residents of the various states. 1790, that's because of the founding of the first citizenship laws in 1790. 1803, the Louisiana Purchase. 1819, Florida. 1845, residents of the Republic of Texas. 1846, Oregon Territory. 1848, California and Mexican Territory. 1854, the Gadsden Purchase, which was Arizona and New Mexico. There are additional ones. Those are just the biggies. Again, adding Hawaii and Alaska in the mid 1900s. Sorry, got to get my century straight. So if you had people who were pioneers or in those locations, there's probably no paperwork. So what is the naturalization process? Well, after 1790 and forward into the 20th century, into the 21st century, it became a standardized process that has some key documents that you're going to want to look for, especially after 1820. Declaration of intention. It could be filed in nearly any court until 1906, and then it had to be filed in federal court. So that early South Carolina record I showed you was pre-1906 in a federal court in South Carolina and reported up to the Department of State, which then went to the National Archives. The petition for citizenship with the oath of allegiance and proof of residency also could be filed in any court. Often it is the same court that you filed the declaration of intention, but not necessarily. When I worked in Topeka, Kansas, I saw so many records that the declaration of intent was filed within weeks of landing in New York or Philadelphia or whatever port they came in through. And then after their residency, and we'll talk about how long you have to live in a minute, then they filed the petition for citizenship where they were then living, which in many cases, they had come in the East Coast. They had been promised land by largely the railroad companies in the Midwest in the late 1800s. And they did a little hop to the center of the country, do not pass go, do not collect your $200. You just get on the train and you go. And so the petition for citizenship would be filed in Kansas or Nebraska or Oklahoma or wherever they were at that point. So check the migratory pattern, follow where they were living, because these records would have been filed where they were living when they hit certain points in the process. And then the certificate of naturalization would be issued to the new citizen. So again, the declaration of intention filed in any court until 1906. After that, it had to be in federal court. In federal district court, it could be local municipal court, it could be court of common pleas. Whenever you were in front of a judge, that's where you would file that paperwork. Again, often filed near the port the immigrant entered the US, sometimes New York. The myth of Ellis Island is strong. Just as a reminder, Ellis Island did not exist before 1892 and finished its path mid-1950s, either 1954 or 1956. Castle Garden was prior to in New York, 1855 to 1892. First federal immigration center. On the West Coast, you have Angel Island outside of San Francisco, was a primary federal immigration port in that latter half of the 1800s. But we had over 100 ports active throughout the country's history. So we're talking Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, New Orleans, Galveston, Texas, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and so many more. So you may think the big ones and you can't find the person there, check the smaller ones in the region because Port of Baltimore is still alive and well. So it just depends. Now that minimum residency, it is a little pesky depending on time period. And it did vary. In the 1790s, in that first law, as we were trying to figure out who were the in people and who were the out people in the new United States with our new little federal government, it was either 3 or 5 years, depending, and it changed a couple of times within the 1790s. 1798, I want to say that was also when we were having the Whiskey Rebellion, because we were trying to tax whiskey to pay for the revolution. But between 1798 and 1801, somebody got a wild hair and changed it to 14 years residency. I have a feeling that in 1801, when it changed to 5 years, and it has stayed at 5 years ever since, that a lot of those people who were told 14 years refiled. Or they may have grandfathered them in and said, you've been here the 5 years, let's get your paperwork done. But know that the laws do change over time. So if you're not finding something you expect to find, do check that. So what do these look like? This is a declaration of intention from Ohio. This is from Ancestry. And as I said, I have to adopt other people's ancestors because I don't have people who did a lot of this paperwork. But this is Adolda Rosa. It gives her address in Cuyahoga, Ohio. It gives her occupation as housewife. She's aged, I believe that's 51 years. She is female, white, fair of complexion, brown eyes, gray hair, 5'3", weighs 175 pounds, and has no distinctive visible marks. She is considered South Italian as her race, nationality Italy, born in Naples, Italy. See, this is where you find your birthplaces, which can be really helpful. And her birth date in 1887. The name of her husband is Arup, and they were married May 9th, 1907 in New York. He was born in Naples, Italy in 1880, entered the United States at New York, January 6, 1906, for permanent residence therein, and now resides in Ohio. They have no children, and the declaration of intention, she actually had done one prior to and then never completed the process. So she's going back through this first step to say, hey, I still want to be a citizen. Because she had done the declaration in April of 1921. Remember, Cable Act is in September of 1922. Her last foreign residence was Naples, Italy. She immigrated from Naples and was lawfully entered into New York. And in 1906, I believe, nope. Her 1914 was when she came in with the intent to immigrate, but she was married in New York in 1907. So that says she may have gone back to Italy for a little bit. And then as things were heating back up prior to World War I, may have decided to come back. I think there was also famine, crop failure in that time period in Italy. And so she came in under the name Adele La Rosa in 1914 on the SS Ancona. Now, one of the really cool things about these declarations of intent is in many of the eras, particularly in the 1900s, 20th century, you get a picture. So that is Ms. Adele La Rosa there on the bottom left. You get her signature on the right, and you get the date that the papers were filed. Now, the certificate also says where the person was born, as well as the declaration of intention. There's a petition for citizenship, oath of allegiance, proof of residency, again, filed together in a court filing at least 5 years after the declaration of intent. And as you saw in Adele's, it includes that last foreign residence, date of entry into the US, method of entry, ship, or don't forget the border crossings, because some people took ships into Canada or Mexico and then crossed the borders. And then you also get affidavits of petitioner and witnesses, which you didn't see on the declaration of intention, but in the petition of naturalization, you do. So this is from the Kazol family, Mary, the wife, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1928. So this is after the Cable Act. She is having to do the petition on her own because she no longer qualifies under her husband's naturalization. But it gives her name, her address, her occupation as a housewife, that they came from Yugoslavia. Spelling is a 20th century invention and must not have gotten through. Transliterations from foreign languages can get wild and woolly. So look at it and see if you can sound it out to some abbreviation of what the words should be. They came in the Aquitania, and in her case, since they came in 1921, they do not have, she doesn't have to do the petition or the declaration of intention because it was prior to the Cable Act. So her husband is Joseph, And I blew the rest of this up, thank goodness. And so you see omitted pursuant to the act of September of 1922 for the declaration. Her husband is Joseph, and he was born in February of 1885 in Yugoslavia and resides in the household with her. They have 6 children, and they list the names of the children. And you see that the children were born in 1912 in Philadelphia, 14 in Philadelphia, 17 in Philadelphia, 19 in Philadelphia, and Antoinette was born in 22 in Yugoslavia. Okay. And then Edward was born in 24 back in Philadelphia. So they had gone home to Yugoslavia to visit family, and one of the kids was born there. So the natural born, the ones born in the United States are being listed because she's being asked to list the names and birth dates of all of their children. And those, they have, even though they were born in the United States, this at least legitimizes that they are citizens through her naturalization. And Antoinette becomes a naturalized citizen by derivative citizenship through her mother's application. Technically, it would be through her father's application, but maybe he forgot to list them. I don't know. Because it says they were married in 1911, February of 1911, and her husband's naturalization was in 1927. There's a blip on that month. I can't read the month there, but the first day of some month in 1927. So a year before she's being naturalized. Why they didn't file everything together, I don't know. But I have a thinking suspicion that, like many women, one of the reasons why the Cable Act got passed in 1922 is because in 1921 is the first time women were allowed to vote in most areas and in federal elections. Don't tell Nebraska that. They had women voting long before that, and some of the other Western Midwest territories and states. So, moving on down the piece of paper, we have her signature. Notice we've got 3 different versions of her first name. We've got Mary, M-A-R-Y. We have Maria, M-A-R-I-A. And we have Maria, M-A-R-Y-A, in different places in some of these records. So again, people were not always consistent. So just keep an eye. But we have her signature actually twice. And the affidavits of petitioner and witness, there's a Joseph Azole Taylor, that would be her husband. And so he might have been going back to Yugoslavia to buy cloth and supplies. I don't know. And then we have Angelo Anaya, who was the wife of, or her occupation was wife, and a neighbor on Richmond Street. So next door neighbor, it looks like 2612 and 2614. So look at the witnesses, because they are people attesting to, they know this person has been in the United States for the 5 years needed, or 14 or 3 or whatever, and they sign it as well. So you may find your ancestor as a witness on a neighbor or a family member's papers. And then you get the clerk report. On the next page of the document, you get the oath of allegiance. So you have to renounce your allegiance to whatever your former government was and say that you are pledging your allegiance to the United States government. And so sometimes this changes over time as borders change, as country names change. It's constant in Europe, the borders change. So you're looking for the city name. The country can be helpful if you know the timing of the document, but you may see someone who has a birthplace in one country and then another country and then another country, and then, oh, it's in Russia. Well, it's because the borders changed around them. They may or may not have moved, but they may have moved. People moved a lot more often than we think. And then there's an order of court admitting the petitioner. Yes, she is now a citizen, May 29th, 1928. If they decide that the person does not qualify for citizenship for whatever reason, they will fill in the order of court denying petition section. I've read some real fun ones over the years, but take a look at that. Always check for the back of the page. And then if the substituted witnesses, if one of the witnesses can't make a court date for whatever reason, if they have to continue the court date because of whatever reason, the judge gets sick or whatever, then they have methods to deal with that. And then you get the certificate number written on this document. Remember, only Mary has the certificate of naturalization for herself. The next page is that verification of arrival. So you will see this eventually standardized card. The U.S. Department of Labor at this point was over the Bureau of Naturalization, and they have an arrival division at Ellis Island to do all the paperwork. That was the largest of the immigration centers and had a heck of a lot of people come through. So they had clerks who all they did was check arrival records and write up these little certificates and send them to the court. And so it does say, Maria, M-A-R-I-J-A, Cazol, August 18th, 1922 was that arrival for permanent admission. They had been here since the much earlier, but 1922 was when they decided, nope, Yugoslavia's getting a little extra. But they did not finish their paperwork until 1937 and 1938. So, finding these papers. Well, look at the local level first. Post 1906, you can go to the INS, Immigration Naturalization Service. They will charge you an arm and a leg and a kidney to get it, and it will take you 18 months. First step in the process. So I don't recommend that unless you have no other recourse. So take a look at the courthouses, the court records, federal, state, county, municipal. A lot of these have indexes. Many of those are on Ancestry and Family Search, or at the state level that library or archive will have finding aids to help. After 1906, the National Archives and Records Administration, regional facility that holds the records for the federal court that handled the papers, but the local court which handled the process may also have a copy, and I will show you an example of that in just a moment. National Archives is at archives.gov. Records Group 59 is the records of the Department of State, has a lot of the passport information, and you'll see some of that in a little bit. But again, Ancestry, Family Search. You may find a notation on a passenger arrival list, and I have an example of that in just a moment. So, Maria, M-A-R-Y-A, Cazol, age 37, petition 90180, issued by the district court at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so, and date ordered admission was in May of 1928. So this index card was what sent Kathy on the track of when to find the Cazol's records, or at least Mary Cazol's records. And Mary's was more interesting because she had the kids on hers. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about passports issued by the U.S. federal government since 1789. They were not required other than, I'm told, a short time in 1861-62 during the Civil War. And then not everybody needed them until approximately the 1940s. So the Department of State has April 1925 to present. The National Archives has the passport applications from October 1795 to March 1925. And so they were also issued by states and localities until August 23 of 1856. So your town clerk might have issued you a passport saying that you were a resident of name the town in New England or the county in South Carolina. So, but in August of 1856, the US State Department was given the sole authorization to get your passport. And again, they were required for travel by US beginning during World War II. And just as a note, your Spartanburg County Public Library's headquarters is a passport application and processing location. So call and schedule your appointment if you need your passport. So just like naturalization, women and children were often covered by the husband or father's passport. This is the photo for the Kozol family from Serbia at that time. And so you can see Mary is the second one from the right. And then this is when the oldest 4 children were alive. So it's still fairly early, not 1938, when there are, I think there were what, 6 children. So 2 more children to come in this. And then this happens to be before they got their US citizenship. This is for that trip that they made in 1922 when Antoinette was born over in Yugoslavia. They went to the Consulate General of the Consulate General of the King of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, Yugoslavia, because they got put together by some war or others peace treaty. And this was in New York City in the name of His Majesty Alexander of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, and it gives them permission to travel on behalf of their country. And you see the date down there is January 16th, 1922. And you see that they used this and it was back and forth a little bit and lots of passport stamps on this one. So they were traveling a fair amount. So the fact that one of the children was born in Yugoslavia is not particularly unusual. So this is an example from my extended family. I think he's a 3rd cousin a couple of times removed. I keep meaning to look that back up in my tree. But James Ross Allen in 1918, I believe, we'll get the date here in a sec, was applying for his passport. Now, he solemnly swears that he was born at Blenheim, South Carolina, on or about the 29th day of July of 1891. And you see written over that it looks like January 20th of 1890. We'll see the reason for that edit in a minute. He resides in Greenville, South Carolina. He is the minister. He's never had a passport before, but he is going to Brazil as a missionary. He plans to stay there and plans to return within 7 years. So he's planning on being there for a while, but it's not, I'm moving to Brazil for the rest of my life. And the ship is to sail from New York, 1919, August of 1919. But you get his signature, James Ross Allen. You get the fact that he has paid his fee. On the back of that page, remember, always check the next page, you get a physical description of him at the top left and identification information. And you get his picture there on the bottom left. And then you get a very nice letter from the Foreign Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention saying, yes, we are sending James Ross Allen and his wife to Brazil as missionaries. So, the passport application had yet another page. His mother, Mrs. Lewis Allen, appeared before the clerk of court in Greenville County to say, I am the mother of Ross Allen, and he was born on August 20th, 1890. I am guessing that this might be if he said the other date, this may be a sibling's date, and she got a little confused. She was the mama. She was obviously there. So they're going to go with what the mother says the birth date is. So you will find these discrepancies in a lot of these records before we have Social Security and they really start buckling down on consistency of records. So another little gem that I found in a, Ancestry pops up the related records collections. Well, this is James Ross Allen Jr.'s registration of birth of children born to American parents through the American Consular Service. So he was born in 1921 in Brazil, and his parents went to the consulate and said, we would like to make sure that our son has American citizenship because we are American citizens. And so they registered his birth. And on the second page, you can't see it, I meant to do a blow up. But on the middle of the second page, it has the registration of the birth in the Brazilian civil records. So it cites where the actual birth registration has been found. And so they want to make sure that this child can get back into the United States with them and have full United States rights and privileges. And dad's passport number is given, but mom does not have her passport at this point. We are still before the 1922 September Cable Act, so she does not need to have her own passport unless she is traveling alone without the husband. So, and that would be unusual in that era. So, well, how did they get back and forth? Well, ship for the most part. Although in the 20th century, once airlines came into being, you get air passenger manifests, which are filed and kept, and you can look them up. I've seen a few early air passenger manifests, just not more recent, because more recent, it is highly likely to be lots and lots of living people, and they tend to not release those until a little bit later in those people's lives. But the passenger list generally tells the ship and country where the person came from and who he or she arrived with. Check the rest of the passenger list. You may find aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, etc. You do need the original name of the immigrant. Pre-1820, there are published lists, indexes, land records, and things that would tell when they entered the country. And in 1820, they began requiring the arrival records by US law. There are lists, National Archives has, Philby's is a big list of immigration and ship passenger lists. I am told that we have received the final volume they will publish in that series because they're running out of ship passenger lists that haven't been published somewhere. Doesn't mean it never existed, it just means it does not currently exist in findable form. But the Family History Library, Family Search, wherever on the internet, lots of different places. And then there are some also, if you are of a particular ethnic variety, there are some lists that are called Germans to America, Irish to America, etc. we had more of those volumes in Topeka than we do here. By and large, the people who landed here initially were Scotch-Irish rootstock and English, and not so much until more recent time. But always check for a second or back page to the document. You're going to also want to double check those border crossings to Canada and Mexico. And check for those family units, because you may find some surprises. So, this is a passenger list for alien passengers. So alien, again, just means foreign, non-US citizens. And this is in 1922. And one of my adopted relatives, this is my first cousin's other grandmother, Grandma Brubaker. I was privileged to know her. And I have permission to use her as a naturalization example. She did come through Ellis Island, so very cool. But when she came, she was Alma Alfred Teresia Peterson. She was a 21-year-old female, single, house worker, so coming over as a domestic. She can read and write in Swedish. She's from Sweden. Her ethnicity is Scandinavian. Her last residence is Hugby, Sweden. And I'm probably butchering the Swedish, sorry. The name of someone back home is her mother, Ida Peterson, in Lettorp. Destination is Brooklyn, New York. Great, good information. Check the back of the page. Because this is also labeled 27 at the top. And you get some great questions back here. She has a ticket to her final destination of Brooklyn, New York. She paid for her own passage. She worked hard as a teenager and saved every penny she could. The family back in Sweden, I'm told, was not well off at all, and there were a lot of children. They asked if you were in possession of $50, or if less, how much. She had $25 in her pocket. She has not been to the US before. She is going to join her cousin, Christina Janssen, at 554 85th Street in Brooklyn, New York. So we now have a cousin's name. Do you intend to return to the country of origin? No. Length that you intend to stay in the US? Ever. I'm assuming she meant forever. Do you intend to become a US citizen? Yes. Have you ever been in prison, a polygamist, an anarchist? Do you believe in the violent overthrow of the government? And are you coming whether due to a promise of employment in the US? Nope, to all of those. But you can tell what the concerns of the country were with the questions they were asking the immigrants. So polygamy was bad. Anarchy was bad. So, you know, if you had an employer promising you a job, they wanted to know about it because that employer was on the hook to make sure that you got settled in. Whether you've been deported within a year, and she had not. So sometimes if you were sick at Ellis Island and it was not something you could get over in a couple of weeks, they would put you back on the boat and send you back to Europe. So there were all sorts of reasons to be deported. They asked the condition of health, physical and mental. Good. She has no deformities. She was 5'2", she was little. Fair complexion, light hair, blue eyes, and no visible marks of identification. And her place of birth was Hugby, Sweden. So she had not gone too far from her place of birth before she got on the USS Stockholm and came to America. She did have a cousin and an uncle in Brooklyn. So, Okay. This is a different passenger list, and this is where I found the key to finding her naturalization records. So, this passenger list, she is on a list of United States citizens in 1939. I actually found this searching for her son, who is below her. If you see where that blue box, that's my uncle's line. He was born in 1937, and she took him home to Sweden to visit the family. And so they're coming back in on the SS Drottningholm and sailing from Gothenburg again in Sweden. And if you look, it gives their address. Well, he was born in New Jersey. And then she holds the certificate of naturalization issued at Common Pleas Court, Paterson, New Jersey, February 18th, 1937, and the certificate number. Gold mine, I know exactly where to look. And the address in the United States, both of them are at the same address. So, in 2016, I Googled the Court of Common Pleas in Paterson, New Jersey, which is in the Passaic County Clerk's office. And I emailed them, did the contact us form, and said, how do I get this record? Well, they said, you send us $8 if you want a certified copy. So the basic copy was $3. To get the one with the seal on it for official was an additional $5 with the apostille. And so I was like, well, let me write you my check for $8, send you in what I needed to send in. And I got back her petition for naturalization. Not the greatest of scans, but hey, if you look hard enough, you can read the faded typewriter type. And it tells us all of the things about Alma. And you see at the bottom, 2016, this is a true copy and the apostille. This is now in the possession of her son, my uncle, because, and they offered to pay me for it. And I'm like, no, your payment is letting me talk about it in my programming. But we have the record because he was the youngest. The paperwork got lost. He had 3 older half sisters, from his father's first marriage. And Alma was originally hired as the housekeeper. And then they apparently fell in love. So, and they married and had Robert. So, on the next page, he signs her oath of allegiance for swearing her allegiance to Gustavus V, King of Sweden. She signs it in February of 1937. So when they come back when they're coming into the United States in 1938, it's not long after she has gotten her citizenship. So, and you get the certificate number. You do get a confirmation of the certificate of arrival on the SS Stockholm, which we've already seen. And then, so in 2021, I looked it up again to see, well, what's the process now? Well, at that point, they had digitized all of their records for the Passaic County Clerk's office. And her petition for naturalization was online, slightly better scanned and darkened. It's not quite as faint. And I was like, oh, great, this is awesome. Well, I checked a couple months ago because I had a patron question about New Jersey naturalizations, and we're back to the send us $8 plus 5 if you are 3 or whatever. Yeah, the apostille is still 5. So, but it's up to $8 per individual record. So they've gone up a little bit, probably realized that they were paying for enough of their budget along the way with these genealogy requests that they couldn't have it out there just free. And it may have also been due to state law changing. So states control what the county clerks can do and cannot do outside of paywalls. And so I haven't checked New Jersey laws to see if that's what the change was. That is my suspicion. If somebody knows, please let us know in the chat. But this is the form. You fill in your little, all of your information, all of the required forms. And I'm pretty sure you can now do it with credit card, whereas I had to send a check. But again, back to it. Now, remember those immigration immigration records, the exiting records. So I don't read Swedish, but I do read standardized forms. And this is a standardized passenger list in Swedish because it is the exiting manifest that was translated while on board to the entering manifest in English for New York. This is the SS Stockholm in 1922 passenger list. And you'll see about 2/3 of the way down, we have Alma Helfred P. Peterson. 55919 is the number in the left-hand column. So, and it has her birth date and where she was coming from and where she was going to, that she was going to Brooklyn, New York. So don't forget that if you can't find an arrival, look for a departure. And this goes both directions. If they are sailing to England to visit a son in the Air Force in England in the 1950s, you're going to find passenger lists going both directions. So don't forget. And if it's in another language, there are plenty of helps through the Family Search Wiki that can help you with those standardized forms and words. Card catalog on Ancestry. If you do a naturalization in the title form, you've got 93 collections to look through. Not all naturalization records have been digitized. Not all of them have indexes online. Sometimes you have to actually go to the individual court and ask the question. Be nice. Know that, you know, their day-to-day job is actually the current court stuff. But you may find things on Ancestry or Family Search. Now, you may only find a index card. This is Northern District of Illinois, U.S. Naturalization Index for an Elizabeth James Rouse. No relation to me. I just like searching for Rouse because it's fun. And this is her information. It tells you the petition number and it tells you the court. So then you follow up with the court. They may tell you, oh, we've turned that over to the archives, but they'll tell you where they turned it over to. So, you know, sleuth it a little bit. And then you may also find some records that the petitions are not as detailed. This is a list of 15 different people being naturalized at the same time. So you may find that there's just a list and with a number of the petition, and then you can request the petition specifically. You will also notice on this that a couple of them in that right-hand column on the left-hand page are changing their names. So Sulmit Chayos is Sol Hayes is what he's changing his name to. Don't let anyone tell you people's names were changed at Ellis Island. They were only changed at Ellis Island if you got on the board of the ship saying, I am John Smith instead of Johannes Schmidt. And then it was potentially translated into John Smith in the English language side of things, but that was only if you told them to. Ellis Island had people there speaking every language that came through. If they did not have someone on duty in their arrivals hall with that language expertise, they would hold you until someone arrived with that language expertise. So if names were changed, it was by the individual after arrival. Were they always filed? Not necessarily, but often when they were changed legally, it was at this naturalization point. Now, they could have been using Sol Hayes for 10 years at this point, but this is when it became legal. So, okay. Questions. If you're online, if you'll type questions into chat, and Cheryl will help me get them.
Actually, we have quite a few, so let's just get started on that. First, pardon me.
Yep.
From Christine, it's not a question, it's just a statement. She said she learned about this program from the Jewish Genealogical Society of Oregon weekly email of upcoming webinars. How cool is that, right?
Cool.
Okay, so there is a question that's kind of in connection with that, and it's from Dale. He wants to know if he can share the handout that you have here with others in his genealogy society.
Yes.
Okay.
You may share it. You may point them to, by the end of the week, we'll have this video up in our genealogy playlist on the YouTube channel. So yeah, feel free to share it with your other genealogy society people, as long as you don't like take my name off it and present it as your own work.
Okay.
I'm a librarian. I'm about freedom of information and getting it. My day job is paid by the library. A lot of our genealogy presenters are actually paid to do the presentations, and so their economics of it is different. So, but thank you for asking, and yes, please feel free to share the link to our playlist and our videos.
Wonderful.
We like to help people.
Christine also noted that she was lucky. Her husband's grandfather asked for a duplicate of his naturalization certificate, so they got a copy of it when I ordered his record, and it has a duplicate stamp on it. So that's pretty fortunate.
Oh, that is extremely fortunate. I have not heard of that happening, but that would be one of those things that you never know what you're going to find in the record files. You may find a copy of a marriage certificate in that file, and it may not have been required, or that particular judge was known to require everything, and so proof was given. So yeah.
Okay. Someone wanted you to clarify something. Children becoming derivative under the parent. What year was that established? I looked through the handout and I couldn't see an actual year. So
it was standard until the Cable Act. And
okay.
Actually after that, if they were under 21, and that I believe is still, if you are under 21 and living in your parents' household and you meet the residency requirement at the time the parent is being naturalized, then the children who qualify get naturalized at that point. If you have already moved out of your parents' household, this is my understanding of current law. If you've already moved out of your parents' household, you do not qualify and will have to do the process on your own accord.
Okay.
So and that is time immemorial. The whole time the children are derivative.
Okay.
And because then you can't make a legal decision until you're 21 federally. I think it's 21. And so you're derivative under a parent until that time. So, okay. Yep.
All right. And Dale wanted to get you to explain again why there might not be a declaration prior to a petition.
Oh, okay. So the declaration of intent, if you are female or arrived prior to 1922 September, the Cable Act, September 22 of 1922, there was a little loophole in there in that time period that said if you had said at the port and it's on your arrival records that you intend to become a citizen, that counted as your declaration of intent, even though it wasn't filed with a court. Now, that's one of those things that particular little wiggle space has opened and closed and closed and opened and closed from my understanding through time. So, but like Mary Cazole, she entered in September of 1920, or in August of 1922, and stated her intention to become a citizen this time. She had obviously been back and forth a time or two to Yugoslavia prior to that declaration of intention. So,
and this statement that she's making is not just verbal. Is it printed or written somewhere?
well, it was written into her just lost the name of the certificate. The second grouping. So her declaration of intention was not officially filed on the form. It was just stated when she came in. And then in 1938, it's typed in on that form. Let me get back to that page.
Okay, I was just wondering if
yeah.
it was just verbal or if it was actually printed on something.
I want to say that it was a situation where that was a time period where they asked her when they came back into the country in that 1922 trip. So, but let's get back to her. Sorry, I don't have a good way of getting out of speaker view and going back. So, okay, we're almost there. So in this, I've got to get some stuff redone here. So if you see third line down where it says 5th, I declared my intention to become a citizen, and it was omitted pursuant to Act of 9/22/22.
Yeah.
So there's something in the Cable Act that was a loophole for these women particularly, but probably men too, that had something there. And it may be because she was a resident prior to that and just returning to her normal home. And then on her arrival record, okay, this one doesn't say, but I've seen the passenger list and I believe it does say that she intended to become a citizen there. And again, that was a loophole just in that time period. But again, it's something to double check for if you're finding the main papers, but you're not finding the declaration of intention. But do double check, because twice on this form it is written that that declaration is omitted pursuant to the Act of 9/22/22. So yeah.
Okay. All right. And one last question, and it's also from Dale. How did you find the immigration passenger list?
Oh, the exiting one, the E one?
Yeah.
Or the
EMM.
Yep. It was actually on Ancestry. But I have searched some from Bremerhaven, Germany. That there are a couple of websites online. That one may not still be online. It came online, and then I don't know. A lot of individuals put a lot of stuff up and then they die, or they aren't able to maintain it, or they forget to pay for the website posting. And so stuff comes up and stuff disappears.
Yeah.
SteveMorse.org does a lot of passenger lists as well as census information. STEVEMORSE.org. not .com. .com is the guitarist for Deep Purple. SteveMorris.org is a genealogist and loves maps and figures and tabulating things. He's a fascinating presenter at conferences. But he does a lot of passenger list links. You will find him on Cindy's list. Oh shoot, how does she spell Cindy? CYNDISLIST, I think. Anyway, Cindy's list, genealogy, Cindy Engel. She does a lot of finding aids for, hey, if you're looking at this topic, take a look here. Here are some resources. Click through to the site. She'll tell you whether they're pay or free. Family Search Wiki, their main education wiki is another place to find links to these. Google can be your friend. Don't trust the AI right now. It makes up sources. It may improve. We'll have a session in the fall about AI stuff, just as a teaser. So yeah, but I would look in those places first to see if you're not finding it in Ancestry or MyHeritage, any of the big ones that you might have access to. I would check with Steve Morse. I would check with Cindy's list and the Family Search Wiki for hints of where else to check.
Okay, so cool. That's wonderful. Well, listen, I want to make sure that I'm correct, but are we taking a little break from now through until the 1st of October, the first Monday in October? So
we will be back first Monday in October 2024, and I don't have my topics completely lined out yet. I've got a list of them that I think are the ones I want to do. I haven't put them in order yet. So keep an eye on the library's calendar of events. We usually get stuff up at minimum about 6 weeks before the event. Okay. And then you can register for the Zoom when that information goes live. So, yep. All right, and great. First Mondays, and next year we don't have a break in first Mondays. Will be first Mondays, October through June. So, okay, excellent. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we appreciate all of the people finding us from all over the place. Tell other people about our series. We're glad to share. Okay, do you want me to stop recording now? Yes, please.